Look around at the place where you live. Is it hilly or flat? Is there a river or an ocean nearby? Is the weather usually hot or cold? Are there many trees growing? All of these are questions that geographers might ask if they were studying the place where you live. Geography is the study of the landforms, bodies of water, climate, and natural resources of a place. It also includes the study of the people who live there and how they use the land and the water and the resources. Because the world is so big and made up of so many different places, geographers have invented tools to make it easier to look at the world. The most important of these tools are maps and globes. Maps and globes can help geographers and you to see the world without ever leaving home. This is a photograph of the Earth taken from a satellite orbiting in space. As you can see, looking at a globe is kind of like looking at the Earth from space. A globe is a model or small copy of the Earth. Like the Earth, a globe is round. At the top of the globe, you can see the North Pole. The North Pole is the northernmost place on the Earth. At the opposite end of the globe is the South Pole. The South Pole is the southernmost place on the Earth. Halfway in between the two poles is an imaginary line that goes all the way around the Earth. This line is called the equator. It divides the Earth into two halves, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. The word hemisphere means half a sphere. A sphere is a round object, like a ball, or in this case, the Earth. Each hemisphere, then, is half the Earth. There is another imaginary line that circles the Earth the other way, running through the North Pole and the South Pole. This line is called the prime meridian. It divides the Earth into the eastern and western hemispheres. Geographers have created a whole series of these imaginary lines to help locate places on the Earth. Lines that run east and west are called lines of latitude. Lines that run north and south are called lines of longitude. These lines intersect to form a grid. Geographers can use this grid to describe the exact location of every place on Earth. A map is a flat drawing of the Earth, or part of the Earth. Since the Earth is round, not flat, a globe is a more accurate way to show the Earth. But maps are useful too. Maps are easier to carry than globes. Also, a map can show you the whole world at once. With a globe, you can only see one side at a time. Maps contain a lot of information to help you use them. Most maps have a small image called a compass rose. It's called a compass rose because it looks like a flower, and like a compass, it can help you find directions. There are 4 cardinal directions. They are north, south, east, and west. North on a map points towards the North Pole. If you are facing north, east is to your right, west is to your left, and south is directly behind you. Information on a map is found in the map key. Symbols are one kind of information found in the map key. A symbol is anything that stands for something else. For example, the map key might tell you that a star is the symbol for a country's capital city. Another piece of information found in the map key is a scale. Since maps are much smaller than the places they show, they have a scale to tell you the real size of a place. A map scale can help you figure out the actual distance between two places. The scale might tell you, for instance, that 1 inch on the map is equal to 100 miles on the Earth. If you looked at the Earth from space, you would see that most of its surface is blue. The blue you see is water. Did you know that 70% or over 2/3 of the Earth's surface is covered with water? Most of the water on the Earth is found in the oceans. The four main oceans are the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian, and the Arctic. The largest of these oceans is the Pacific Ocean. It is so big that all of the land on the earth could easily fit inside it. The Pacific Ocean is also the deepest ocean. Its average depth is nearly 13,000 feet. That's 10 times the height of the Empire State Building. The bottom of the ocean is called the ocean floor, but it isn't flat like a floor. The ocean floor has hills, mountains, and valleys, just like on land. In fact, some mountains on the ocean floor are taller than any mountains on land. Some of these mountains rise up above the surface of the water to form islands. All of the water found in the oceans is salt water, but people and animals cannot drink salt water. They need fresh water to drink in order to live. There is very little fresh water on the earth compared to salt water. In fact, only 3% of the earth's water is fresh water. Fresh water is found in different bodies of water, such as rivers and lakes. Do you know the difference between a river and a lake? A lake is a body of water completely surrounded by land. A river is a body of water that flows across the land and usually empties into a lake or an ocean or another river. Fresh water can be found in many other bodies of water too, such as ponds, streams, and swamps. All of the water found on the earth today, both salt water and fresh water, is the same water that has been here since the beginning of time. No new water can be made. The same water just keeps going around and around in a process called the water cycle. When water is warmed by the sun, it evaporates or turns into water vapor and rises up into the air. When the air cools, the water vapor condenses or turns into tiny droplets of water, which stay in the air, forming clouds. These tiny droplets join together to form bigger drops, and eventually the water falls back to the ground as rain, snow, or another form of precipitation, and begins the water cycle all over again. If water covers 70% of the Earth's surface, then the rest of the surface, or about 1/3, is covered by land. The largest bodies of land on the Earth are called continents. The 7 continents are North America, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia, and Antarctica. The largest of the 7 continents is Asia. Asia is over twice the size of North America, which is the 3rd largest continent. Which do you think is the 2nd largest continent? It's Africa. If you looked at the surface of the earth, you would see that the shape of the land changes from place to place. In some places, the land is very steep, while in other places, the land is fairly flat. Different shapes of the surface of the land are called landforms. Mountains are high landforms that rise steeply above the surrounding land. Mountains are usually found in groups called ranges. Hills are raised landforms that are not as high as mountains. Plains are flat parts of the land, but they aren't always completely flat. You could find small hills or deep valleys on a plain. A plateau is an area of flat land that is higher than the land around it. There are many other kinds of landforms besides mountains, hills, plains, and plateaus. One you may have heard of is an island, which is a piece of land completely surrounded by water. One you may not be familiar with is a peninsula, which is a piece of land almost completely surrounded by water. Florida is an example of a peninsula. It is surrounded on 3 sides by water. Landforms are on the surface of the earth, but what is under the surface? The inside of the earth is made up of several layers. The top layer is called the crust. It is made of rock and soil. In some places, the crust is as thick as 20 miles. That may sound like a lot, but when you consider that it is over 4,000 miles from the center of the Earth to the surface, you see that the crust is actually a very thin layer. Underneath the crust are layers of rock and metal that are so hot, some of it is melted or molten. If you look at a map of the world, you can see that some of the continents look as if they might fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. Geographers think that millions of years ago the continents were all joined into one big piece of land. Then they broke apart and very slowly moved to where they are today. They are still moving, you just can't feel it because they only move a few centimeters a year. This movement of the continents is called continental drift. The continents move because the Earth's crust moves. The crust doesn't move all in one piece, but in large sections called plates. The plates can move because they are floating on top of the molten rock underneath the crust. As the plates move, they sometimes pull apart, and other times bump into each other. Earthquakes often occur near places where two plates meet. When plates move past each other, the ground above can suddenly bend or break apart, causing earthquakes. Volcanoes, too, often form where plates meet. As plates move, molten rock sometimes squeezes up through cracks in the crust. Molten rock that flows out of the ground is called lava. Lava can build up over time to form volcanic mountains. Earthquakes and volcanoes are examples of forces inside the Earth that can cause changes to the Earth's surface. But other changes to the Earth's surface are caused instead by forces on the Earth. Water, for example, can cause changes to the Earth's surface. Ocean waves slowly wash away sand from the seashore. A flowing river, over time, can carve deep valleys into the land. In very cold areas, large pieces of ice called glaciers slowly move across the land, scraping away the ground beneath them. Wind, too, can cause changes to the Earth's surface. As the wind blows, it carries away soil, gradually wearing down the land in a process called erosion. When the soil carried by the wind blows against rocks, it acts like sandpaper, gradually smoothing away their rough edges. This wearing away of rocks is called weathering. What's the weather like where you are today? Weather is another thing geographers look at when they study a place. But since weather can change from one day to the next, geographers are more interested in the kind of weather a place has over a long period of time. The weather pattern of a place over time is called climate. A place's climate is affected by many different things. The most important of these is the sun. The sun gives light and warmth to every place on Earth, but not all places get the same amount of sunlight. This is because of the way the Earth moves around the sun. The Earth is constantly spinning, or rotating, on its axis, an imaginary line running through the center of the Earth. As it spins, the Earth also moves around the sun. This movement is called revolution. The time it takes for the Earth to make one revolution around the sun is called a year. The Earth's axis is not straight up and down, but tilted. Because of this, as the Earth moves around the sun, sunlight hits different parts of the Earth at different times of the year. When the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, it gets more direct sunlight. The more sunlight a place gets, the warmer it becomes. Of course, if one side of the Earth is facing towards the sun, the other side is facing away from the sun. So when it is winter in the northern hemisphere, it is summer in the southern hemisphere. But in some places, like Florida, the weather is warm almost all the time. Other places, like the North Pole, stay cold all year round. One reason for this is latitude. Latitude is how far a place is north or south of the equator, measured in the imaginary lines we learned about earlier, called lines of latitude. Since the equator gets direct sunlight all year long, places located here stay warm year-round. The North and South Poles get the least amount of sunlight. In fact, for half the year, they get no sunlight at all. The closer a place is to the poles, the colder its climate. Another thing that can affect a place's climate is elevation. Elevation is how high a place is above sea level. Generally, the higher a place's elevation, the colder its climate. That is why you might see snow on top of a mountain even during the summer. When geographers study a place's climate, they don't just look at how hot or cold it is. They also look at how much rain, snow, or other form of precipitation the place gets. How would you describe the climate of the desert? Hot, definitely. But you might also say the desert is very dry. Places located in the desert receive very little rainfall. If you visited a tropical rainforest in South America, you would say that the climate there is also very hot. But unlike places in the desert, places in the tropics receive a great deal of precipitation. Places located in polar regions, near the North and South Poles, might also get a lot of precipitation. But since the temperatures there are usually very cold, most of the precipitation is in the form of snow. Take a look out the window. Do you see many trees growing? Trees are an example of yet another thing geographers look at when they study a place: natural resources. A natural resource is something found in nature that people use. Trees, soil, minerals, and water are all examples of natural resources. Trees are a very important natural resource. They are used to make paper, furniture, and houses. Trees are a type of natural resource called vegetation. Grass and flowers are other types of vegetation. The amount of vegetation a place has depends a lot on its climate. Trees need a lot of water to grow, so they are usually found in places that get a lot of precipitation. You won't find many trees in the desert because it doesn't get enough rain. In fact, few plants at all grow in the desert because it is so hot and dry. Some places are too cold to have very much vegetation. In polar regions, the ground is frozen all year long, making it difficult for plants to grow. Vegetation depends a lot on another natural resource, the soil. The soil in the Great Plains region of the United States is very rich and good for growing wheat and other crops. That is why there are so many farms located here. In some other places, the ground is too rocky or sandy for plants to grow. Soil and vegetation are examples of natural resources found on the land. But natural resources can also be found in the land. Resources found in the land are called minerals. There are many different kinds of minerals. Minerals are usually divided into two groups, metals and nonmetals. Some metals, such as gold and silver, are rare and very valuable. Others can be found in large amounts and are used in manufacturing. Iron ore is used to make steel, and aluminum is used to make soda cans. There are many kinds of non-metal minerals used for many different purposes. Sand is used in construction, and nitrates are used as fertilizers. One non-metal mineral you probably use every day is sodium chloride, or table salt. Fossil fuels are another form of non-metal mineral. Fossil fuels include coal, natural gas, and petroleum oil. They get their name because they are made from fossils of dead plants and animals. People use fossil fuels to heat buildings and to run machines, such as cars. Water is another important natural resource. You have seen how plants need water in order to grow. People and animals, too, cannot survive without fresh water to drink. Although we cannot drink the water in the oceans because it is salt water, oceans are still an important natural resource. Fish and other animals that live in the oceans are a source of food for many people. Natural resources are very valuable and must be used carefully so that we don't run out of them. Recycling is one way to help conserve our resources. Recycling means using things over again. By recycling aluminum cans and newspapers, we can help make our trees and mineral resources last longer. Another way to help save our natural resources is to stop pollution. Pollution is harmful substances that people add to our land, air, and water. Many rivers and lakes have become polluted, killing fish and making the water undrinkable. Smoke from factories and gas fumes from cars pollute the air we breathe. Laws have been passed to prevent pollution, but we must all do our part to help conserve the Earth's natural resources. If you looked at a map of the world, you would see that some areas have many towns and cities, while other areas seem to have very few people living there. Why do people choose to live in some places and not in others? The reasons have a lot to do with geography. Many people choose to live near water. That's because they need water for drinking and for growing food to eat. Another reason many cities are located near the water is because traveling by boat is an easy way to get from place to place. Water also makes it easier to transport goods. You probably would not find many people living on top of a mountain. It is too hard to get there, and it would be too difficult to build houses on its steep slopes. You are much more likely to find a city in a fairly flat area, because building houses and roads would be easier. It is also easier to grow crops on flat ground. People like to live in places that have a nice climate. Many people choose to live in Florida because it is warm there all year long. Few people live in the desert because it is too hot. You won't find many people living at the North Pole either because the weather is too cold. The people who do live there have had to learn ways to survive the harsh polar climate. People choose to live in areas that have the natural resources they need. Throughout history, people have settled where they could find soil, water, and sunlight needed to grow food. Other natural resources attract people too. Many people moved to the western United States during the gold rush in the 1800s. Most of the gold may be gone now, but the cities that sprang up there, such as Denver, Colorado, and San Francisco, California, remain. Geography not only affects where people choose to live, but also how they live. People who live by the water are more likely to travel by boat and eat a lot of fish. You might also find a lot of people working as fishermen near the ocean. Many people who live on flat land make their living as farmers. You probably wouldn't find many farmers in the mountains, but you might see a lot of people mountain climbing there during their free time. People who live in hot climates wear very light clothing and build houses that let in the cool night breezes. People in very cold climates wear fur to keep warm and live in houses that are well insulated against the cold. Natural resources affect how people live too. People who live in places with a lot of trees might live in houses built of wood. In the desert, where there are no trees, people build their houses from clay bricks dried in the hot sun. In areas with large deposits of coal and iron ore, many people make their living as miners, or they might work in the factories that turn these natural resources into steel. Water, land, climate, and natural resources. These four things together shape the geography of a place. They also help make every place on Earth a little bit different. With so many different places in the world, how do geographers keep up with them all? One way is by dividing the world into regions. A region is a group of places with things in common. Places in a region might have similar landforms, such as the Rocky Mountain region of the United States. Or perhaps they have similar climates, like the tropics. People living in a region might have similar religious beliefs or speak the same language. In other words, they might share a common culture. Culture is the way of life of a group of people. Language, religion, art, government, clothing, and even food are all part of a region's culture. The same things that shape a region's geography, land, water, climate, and natural resources, also shape its culture. They determine what people wear, what they eat, what they do for a living, and what they do to have fun. Today, people living in different regions of the world are coming into contact with each other more and more. Telephones, television, airplanes, and computers have made it easier for people from different regions to share ideas and cultures with one another. All of this makes the study of geography more important than ever before. The better we understand the land, water, climate, and natural resources of other places in the world, the better we will understand the people there too. What is the name of the imaginary line that divides the Earth into the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere? What percentage of the Earth's surface is covered with water? Can you name the 4 main oceans? Which one is the largest? Can you name all 7 continents? Mountains and hills are 2 basic types of landforms. Can you name 2 others? Can you define the word climate? Which would have a warmer climate? A place located near the equator or a place located near the North Pole? Trees, flowers, and grass are all examples of what type of natural resource? Where would you be more likely to find a large city? On top of a mountain or on a plain? Why? What do we mean by the word region?